My God. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of the Portuguese-American Hour. We are a product of the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute, and our segment is on history. And of course, we also have these segments as podcasts and available through Facebook Live. As always, we have Madam Dr. Monique Kelley-Valance, a PhD in Portuguese history from the University of California in Santa Barbara. Welcome, Monique. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing fine. Thanks. How are you?
Fine, thanks. And what are we going to learn today about the Portuguese history? Which segment, where, which decade? Where are you taking this?
Well, I think we're going to go back to the 17th century, the 1600s. The something that's really interesting is the English merchants that lived in Portugal starting, mostly in the 1600s and onwards, because England had, such a big part of Portuguese history. And the English living in Lisbon, these merchants had a big impact as well. I mean, because obviously Portugal needed England for trade, but England needed Portugal as well. And, because the only thing that they grow naturally in England is fog and sheep. And so you can't really get much for that. So they really need other people, other countries. What is the potential for conflict is the fact that at the time the English were Protestant and of course the Portuguese are Catholic. And so it makes you wonder, well, how did they get along considering we have these two different religions? And Portugal had the Inquisition. And so when we hear the Inquisition, we think of the boogeyman, right? These big, bad church people that tortured people and set people on fire, which they did, if you were found guilty of certain religious crimes. We have to remember that during this time, there was a separation of church and state legally because, the church handled all of the religious crimes, heresy, witchcraft, Judaism, Protestantism, and whereas the king was in charge of the civil crimes, like murder and all this other stuff. So there was this thing, and the Inquisition took its job very seriously. So you have these English Protestants coming into Portugal, and as we talked about last time, because of Portugal's war with Oliver Cromwell, now they had to quote unquote grant religious freedom to the English merchants coming into Lisbon. Now there was actually a group of English merchants that were Catholic, but obviously the majority were Church of England, and the Inquisition didn't fully accept that Article 14 of this treaty from 1656, because they're like, well, yeah, the king signed that, but that's not his place, and we don't really recognize that the English should have freedom of religion. We don't want that. But on the other hand, they were very tolerant as far as what the English brought with them. So essentially, if the English came to Portugal and they kept their noses clean and they didn't make a huge spectacle of themselves and didn't wave around a lot of Bibles and things like that, the Inquisition would leave them alone. So it was kind of just like, you do your thing and we'll do our thing, and just don't advertise the fact that you're Protestant and we'll be fine. And this is obvious from the minute the English set foot in Lisbon, they would come in on their ship and they would wait for the Inquisitors would actually come on board the ship and search the ship to see if they found any taboo articles. So they would bring usually an interpreter, usually would be an English Catholic, with them to help interpret for the English merchants going to speak Portuguese. And, as long as they didn't find anything crazy, if they found books, they were okay with that because most Portuguese people couldn't read English anyway. So it didn't bother them if they brought a Bible or Luther's works or Calvin or anything like that. And then if the English suspected that they had anything that might be kind of iffy, they would just hide it and wait till everybody left the ship, and then they would smuggle it out. And usually they were fine. So they pretty much, had this sort of live and let live policy because nobody really wanted to make trouble with the English, and the English didn't really want to come and make trouble with the Portuguese. That is until 1656. There's a guy named Thomas Maynard who became the English consul in Portugal. Now, he wasn't a Puritan, so he wasn't a big Cromwell supporter, but he was Church of England, so he was very passionate about being Protestant. And he actually boasted that he was the first Protestant. He said, I'm the first Protestant that ever served the office of consul in this place, which hugely troubles the Inquisition. And this does get him into trouble. So in 1659, there was an English Catholic lady named Margaret Throckmorton who was sent to Portugal because her family was Catholic and they had sent her to become a nun in Portugal. Somehow or other, this little lady got talked to and decided that she wanted to leave the Catholic Church and become Protestant, become Church of England. And so she was supposed to, she was supposed to join the English Brigantine Sisters. So she just, I don't know how she, who influenced her, who talked to her or whatever. And it could just very well be she didn't want to be a nun. But she ran away from the convent and ran to Thomas Maynard's house, which caused a huge amount of problems. So Queen Louisa, Don Juan IV's wife, actually got herself involved because she got to protect the good little Catholic girl from getting, these bad influences from these bad Protestant men. And so she suggested that Miss Throckmorton be taken to a private house where the Inquisition could counsel her. And so Maynard said, nope, you can't enter my house. She's a Protestant woman and she has all the rights of the protection of the English crown. And so she's protected by diplomatic immunity. And the Inquisition's like, sorry, your diplomatic immunity doesn't exist with us. Do you know what you can go do with that? So they came to his house anyway and raided it looking for her, but somehow they had smuggled her out in the meantime. So she was not found and they released him. So it's quite the scandal because here you have agents of the Inquisition who are, forcibly entering the house of a diplomat looking for this young girl. And he was very upset. He said, how dare you violate my house and things like that. And, the Portuguese were like, look, we had you under house arrest. You had your wife there. You were comfortable. You had nice food. We didn't put you in prison. So calm down. So it wasn't very.
And it's easy. It's today's world. And, we can say, well, gosh, there's basically no, there's differences, but there is no major conflict between the several brands, let's put them that way, of Protestantism and the Catholic Church. There's not any. There's differences, of course, and there are differences in practices, but there's no major conflict between the Baptists and the evangelical Christians and the Catholics. But one must remember that this is, as you said, in the 1600s, and it was a different world, and there were some very major conflicts between any brand of Protestant practice and the Catholic faith,
right?
Because they'd split up. They split up. Not too long ago. Just a few years or a few centuries ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to remember too. And I'm so glad you brought that up because we have to remember that back then, we think of ourselves now as like in religion is a very individual belief system, a very individual choice. Like if I believe to be this, this is my personal beliefs, and this only affects me. But in the 17th century, they didn't think that way. Both English and both Protestant and Catholics believe that we're very much in this together. And so if we're all Catholic, for instance, and we allow these people to be Protestant or Jewish or whatever it is, they're going to take everybody down with us, like with them. Like it's not just they're going to go to hell and we're going to go to heaven. Too bad for you. It's you're going to take us with you because God expects us to maintain certain things here on earth, and this is one of those things is very important. So if there's people here not going to church, or if they're desecrating what we believe to be religious articles or things like that, then God might send all of us to hell. And so we need to make sure that we're all on the same page religiously, because this could be bad for all of us. And they didn't have this concept of this is me and that's you. And so, people today might, like you said, would be like, well, why are you bothering this guy? Like, leave her alone if she doesn't want to be. But there's so many other things involved with it, rather than just, hey, she's a girl who doesn't want to be a nun.
Yeah. I think that sometimes we look at it with today's lens and we say, when we talk about any parts of the Protestant, church, whether it be, as I said, Baptists or any other congregation. And we all say, well, we're all Christian. It doesn't make a difference if you're a Catholic, if you're a Baptist, if you are Episcopalian, we're all Christians. But it wasn't thought that way in the
Right.
1600s. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, even with the Puritans in Salem, 1691, I mean,
Sure.
the witch trials, a lot of the women who were accused as witches were women who didn't go to church. And so you didn't go to church on Sundays, contrary to popular belief, people, the Pilgrims and the Puritans did not believe in religious freedom at all. They just wanted it for themselves and not for anyone else. So they, it makes me so mad when people say they came for religious freedom, or they believed in it. But they would, if you did not go to church on Sunday, you were a suspect person. And we it's our duty to make sure that everybody's doing the right thing.
Sure.
We all have a
Sure.
duty to each other. So
Sure.
yeah, and so that's kind of what, sort of Maynard comes to England, and he sort of like, messes with the balance that they had in Lisbon, where it was kind of like, hey, live and let live, which was really remarkable considering, here we have the Inquisition so strong, and they're just kind of allowing them to sort of do their own thing as long as they're not, super, on the street corner preaching or anything. And what's funny is that, the English themselves didn't appreciate when the Portuguese were sending, they were sending priests to England. So there was, this community of Portuguese Catholics in England as well. And the number of priests that they sent to England was far more than the number that they would need to serve the amount of people that were living there. But they thought, hey, if they're letting us send priests, let's send as many as we can, see
Sure.
how many we can convert. And because I mean the majority of a lot of the Portuguese people living in London were actually Jewish and not Catholic. So they were out there as well trying to convert English Protestants. So it went both ways. But it's just really interesting kind of how the religion kind of plays these dynamics of politics as well, and how this is kind of can mess things up between the two.
So it could have been a major incident that didn't become that major between Portugal and England.
Yeah. Yeah,
Indeed.
as we talked about before, they had this treaty with England, and everybody was mad. A lot of the Inquisition, a lot of people at court were really mad at Joan for signing this and for allowing the English Protestants to have this supposed, freedom of religion. And that's why the Inquisition is like, we're just going to pretend like that didn't happen. Like it doesn't exist. They still wanted to have some kind of modicum of control. And I think the fear was that if they allowed the Protestants to just do whatever they wanted, then they would run around, start trying to convert, Catholics. And that was, so I think the Inquisition still wanted to even though they didn't really enforce it a whole lot, they still wanted to at least say that they had that control in case they needed to use it.
Indeed. Well, fascinating as always. The other day I was crossing along something on the research I was doing for something came across. It was a journalistic piece. It wasn't a historical piece, or it wasn't an academic piece. It was a journalistic piece, but it kind of irked me when the journalist said, and I'm trying to quote exactly, but I want to paraphrase something like, "What would the Portuguese history be without the English?" And obviously,
Oh,
obviously, this was an English journalist,
who is
but
this?
so I guess there's that thought across the pond in the island nation that the Portuguese kind of owe. I mean, the alliance have worked both ways, and it probably in some aspects benefited England more than Portugal. What's your quick assessment on that? I know
Oh, I
I mean, it's something we
yeah.
could go on forever,
Right.
but
Yeah. I mean, definitely you can pinpoint a few times where England, I mean, definitely helped out Portugal out of a pinch.
sure.
But by and large, just the amount of products that came out of Portugal that went to England, England very much knew that Portugal was a really important trading partner, which is why when Napoleon tried to get Portugal to stop trading with England, the British did whatever they could to stop that from happening. And that's why João VI went to Brazil. I mean, that was a really drastic move. So they knew, even though now they might try to pretend like, oh yeah, where would the Portuguese be without us? Let me ask you, where would the English be without the Portuguese? You can't eat fog and you can't eat coal. So you
Try.
drink your port wine and just,
That's true. That's true. Look at all the English names in the port wine industry,
right.
from Sandman to all of them. Well, fascinating as always. Thank you so much, Monique. We appreciate it. Dr. Monique Kelley-Valance, a PhD in Portuguese history from the University of California in Santa Barbara. That was our history segment. Thank you, Monique, and thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you all.